Becca, what's the name of that song?
Travel On.
Travel On. Kind of thought so, but I didn't want to assume. Perfect lead in to what I'm going to talk about today. So I love how Spirit works. I love how Spirit works because It's in Every One of Us was a talk title that was decided by a group of people over a year ago. And so today's about sharing a story because a real shift happened in me this past week about me as minister and what that means to me leading a community and how do I do that effectively. And so I'll start by saying that in September, the Core Council said yes, you guys know them as the Board of Directors, sorry, the Board of Truth, said yes, you can go at a ministerial retreat. And I was all ready to go, and I had a meeting here with Eric Odell and Reverend Heather and a team from Amazing Grace, and we started to talk about the next trip to Cambodia and how the two communities could do that together in 2017. And so that was very exciting. And as we're talking, Reverend Eric said to me, "So are you going to the retreat?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why?" And I kind of thought about the retreat, and he said, Reverend Colette is going to the conference, Engage Spirituality. And I thought, because that had been tugging at my heart. I really thought that was where I should be. And so as Heather and she was taking me to meet Paul, and as we're sitting in her car, I turned to her and I said, don't you really think that where we belong is at a conference called Engage Spirituality? And like that, we canceled our trip to the ministerial retreat and ended up this week in San Diego with Unity, Reverend Mike, the ministers from the head of the Unity ministry and the head of the center that we met at. They're on the AGENT, which stands for Association of Global New Thought organization, which Centers for Spiritual Living belongs to. And so our leader, Dr. Ken Gordon, was there. Michael Beckwith was there. David Alexander was there. He's our chair of our organization. He's also on the AGENT chair. And then two women from Unity. And it was one of the most amazing experiences I could have gone to. And what I hope will happen, because I believe they're going to have these yearly, is that next year more and more people will go, because it's not just for ministers and practitioners. It's for people, and it's a call to rise up. It's a call to rise up, first of all, to rise up in this country and say enough. Enough. We have to stop hating each other. We don't have to agree with each other, and we need to stop hating each other, because hate begets hate. Love begets love. And so if you want peace, like Becca is saying about, you have to be peace. And so one of the calls they talked about was being a spiritual first responder. How do we do that as a community? Oh yeah, I'll say that again. Spiritual first responder. Whoa. And for me, because this week lit me up, and then I thought, well, maybe the Genesis community doesn't want to be lit up and get active. And so, my thing, one of the reasons I'm standing here is to not only ask, do you want to do that? I'm looking for suggestions from all of you of how do we do that? How do we do that as a community? How do we take this to the streets, if you will? I mean, it's nice we're here on Sunday. I love Sundays. I love seeing all of you. And this is a 24/7 job now. And not just for me, not just for the practitioners, for every single one of us. Every single one of us. So one of the stories that was shared, and I would never be able to pronounce the names in the Bible, nor am I going to try, but it is from the book of Nehemiah. And it's a story. We, in New Thought, we look at every story in the Bible as a metaphysical instead of taking it literally. And so in the Bible, it says this young man was building a church. And what he was really doing was resetting the consciousness, raising the consciousness of the people. And somebody was very fearful. Well, if he does that, then the people might really rise up. And so they kept calling to him, come down. We have something we want to show you. Come down. And his response was, I am doing great work. I refuse to come down. And that is where we need to be. I am doing great work. I refuse to come down. I refuse to let your negativity pull me down, is what you're saying. I will stand in truth. Because we all have opinions. It doesn't matter if you go to church here, if you go to church back there, if you go to a Christian church. We all have opinions. That's not truth. They're opinions. They're beliefs. And yet truth stands absolutely strong in principle. And so to live from that truth. And so I started to think about that. And I used to have the 10 top reasons why you would come to Everyday Center for Spiritual Living. And yes, it was the 10 top reasons, because that's where I was the minister for that center. And one of them was, we're spiritual, not religious. Now, if you were religious, how would you feel if I said that to you? We say things and we don't realize the negative impact it might have on somebody. You know, when somebody says, oh, I don't watch TV. Now, see how I said that? Because that's what I hear in my head when they say it. Because I like TV, and I think that I assume they're making me wrong. They're just making a statement. That they don't own a TV or whatever, but energetically, we're always going to the defend. And the idea is, when are we going to stop that? So there was a great story that they shared about Gandhi. And Gandhi got on a train and realized when he'd gotten on, one of his shoes had fallen off his pack. Now, what would we all do? I'll speak for myself, because it's the only one I know. If we realized we'd lost a shoe, I would freak out. Oh my God, what's going to happen to my shoe? And I've got to put out word to everybody to look for my shoe. You know what he did? He took his shoe and threw it out the window. Because he figured that the person that found his other shoe, better that he have two shoes than two men have one. That's where we need to get to as a community. We need to start to rise up to who we are here to be. We're God-informed. I say that every single Sunday. And then I think that I either get lazy or I forget or I get caught up in something. And then some of my responses aren't coming from that place of, oh my God, that's God talking to you. God would never say that. And so how do we act? How do we be in the world? And it's an opportunity for us to decide that too many people of color are being killed in this country. Now, how many of you just went, okay, that got uncomfortable, right? And so the call was, we need to be uncomfortable. We need to be uncomfortable. We live in this country, that has to stop. We're taking people's land away from them and ruining their water because we can. And we need to rise up. And I don't know what that looks like. But I think collectively, we can decide as a community, what do we do? What do we do as a community? Living in Burien, Washington, kind of safe up in the northwest corner of the world. And yet, I don't think everybody in this state feels safe. So they talked about Rosa Parks, how she probably got on that bus every single day. And then one day her soul finally said, enough. I can't live like this. I would rather die than be told I can't sit where I choose to sit on a bus. And I think that's what happened to my soul at that conference. I am tired of being quiet. We have a voice, and we need to be heard. You know, I was thinking social justice, that could kind of make people nervous. Spiritual justice, that sounds a little weak. How about human justice? What if we took a stand for human justice? Because that's who we are. We're humans, every single one of us, regardless of how we choose to be in relationship, who we choose to love, where we choose to go to church, any of that, we're human. If we cut each other, we're all bleeding the same color. Every single one of us. Every single one of us. We need to start acting like that. We need to start reaching out across the aisle and caring about one another. And since some people aren't willing to do that, then we need to start that conversation. We need to be that community. And that makes me nervous. Because some of you are thinking, I don't want to be that community. Or maybe you're not. But it is a way for us to show up. This is one of the things they said, and when they said it, they were talking about not only religious science, not only unity, not only independent. They were talking about new thought. If you really believe this philosophy is the way to heal this country. Because this philosophy is based on oneness. And if it's based on oneness, then everybody is one. One family, one world, one God. That wasn't the exact words of the song. I forget it right now. But it is a way for us to be present with each other. And I do not have all the answers. I wish I did. They didn't have all the answers. The brilliance was at the end of the conference, they called everybody together and they came up with statements about what does it mean to be the conscious majority in a new thought movement. What does that mean? And so I give you that. What does that mean? To practice this philosophy, to believe this philosophy, to live these principles, then how do we show up? Because if we're going to run and hide, if we're going to stay inside these four walls, then I don't think we're living the gifts that we've been given by God as God. Every person here has that gift. Every single person here has that gift. I shared with Yvette, so I'm going to share it with you guys because she thought it was so funny. I had said to Yvette, because she said, could you give me a little coaching of my Wednesday night talk? And I said, sure. I said, my hope would be that you would not use your notebook. And then I thought of her when I was at this conference, because another Gandhi story that they shared was the fact that a mother came up with her little boy and said, he eats way too much sugar. Please tell him to stop eating sugar. He will listen to you. You're a holy man. And he said, okay, come back in 2 weeks. So she came back in 2 weeks. And she walked up to him, expecting brilliance. And Gandhi looked at the little boy and said, stop eating candy. And the mother looked at him and went, seriously? You could have said that 2 weeks ago. I traveled all this way again to sit in front of you, and that's what I get? And he said, it took me 2 weeks to give up sugar. So what I realized, if I was going to tell a vet, you probably shouldn't have your notes, that maybe I shouldn't have mine either. We have to live these principles. We have to live what we tell people. If we're going to tell our kids to behave, we have to behave. Oh darn. We don't have to be boring. Yeah, we can laugh and have fun. So the story I wanted to share with you, and I do have notes as far as you're allowed to have notes for quotes, notes for names that you might forget. And I thought, you might forget this person's name. His name is Wally Triplett, and you probably don't know anything about him. Wally was born in 1924, and he was an amazing football player. And so in 1944, he got offers from schools. Now think about it, in 1944, your offers from school came the old-fashioned way. They came in the mail. There wasn't video conferencing. You didn't send pictures. You filled out a form, sent it to the schools. He was such a fabulous football player that he got an offer from the University of Miami. University of Miami-Dade County was a segregated city and a segregated school in 1944. So Wally thought it might be a good idea if he wrote back to the school and said, just so you know, I'm a person of color. And so they wrote back and said, gee, we're sorry. We're going to rescind our offer. And so Wally ended up at Penn State. And I tell you this story because Penn State used to be held up as one of the elite schools in this country. And then just recently, they had a horrific thing happen at their college where they just sank. You think of Penn State and you think of what happened in 2011. You don't think about their long history. And so Penn State, took down Joe Paterno's statue, and there was this big empty space. And so they called on their graduating students from all the alumni, create something that can sit where that statue sat, that people can look at and be healed. And if you've ever watched a Penn State game, one side of the stadium will yell, "We are," and the other side yells, "Penn State." And whether you like Penn State or not, when you hear it, it gives you goosebumps. And they'd lost that. So one of the students came up with a "We Are" that is artistically, it's not just "We Are," he designed it architecturally and made it out of steel that they buffed, so when you walk up to read the "We Are," you see yourself. And why he did that was he wanted to know, where did this story of "We Are," why do we say that? There's got to be a reason. Every school has a chant. Every school must have a reason for their chant. And it was because of Wally Triplett and one other black man that played football at Penn State in 1944, when the University of Miami said at the end of the football season, the last game Penn State was going to play, you can't come if you bring your football players, your two black football players. They're not welcome here. And so what these young men, because remember, football players are between the age of 18 and 22. These young men got together and had a meeting. No coaches. They call them team meetings. Only the team gets to be there. They had this meeting and they said, "We are Penn State. We go together or we don't go." That's where it came from. We are Penn State. And so when they didn't go to Miami, and then the next year they ran the table and they ended up in the Cotton Bowl. Probably around 1946, Again, in the South, in Texas, segregated. You can come and play football, but you're going to have to stay at 2 separate hotels. And the team said, no, we aren't. We'll go stay on an Air Force base where we can stay together. And so the call to action is, we are Genesis. What does that mean? What does that mean to each one of you as we build community? How do we, as a community, stop sitting on our hands and become a voice for people around us that feel disenfranchised, that feel separate, that feel like they have to keep their hands out of their pockets if they go into a Walmart? It's a call to action, because that's what I got when I went to engage spirituality. If not now, when? And if not us, who? Who's it going to be? It's going to be me. That much I know. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So remember, we are Genesis. Genesis. We are Genesis. Thank you. Namaste.